48 million people shared this clip in just one day. A kangaroo waiting politely to board its plane. It is adorable, improbable, and as fact checkers quickly proved, 100% fake. And so that ticket, that departure board, everything about this cute kangaroo was simply generated out of an AI prompt. And that really makes us wonder, right? Because if a harmless airport gag can now fool almost everyone, what slips through tomorrow? And I have to admit that I used to reassure myself by saying that AI creations would just be too perfect. Everything looks razor sharp and everything is smooth. And it's not what humans are. But soon enough, I realized it was totally naive from me. Because when you listen now to AI-generated voice, for example, they are adding imperfections so that it sounds more human. For example, they add coughs or breaths, awkward pauses, and so on. And so now those voices sound actually as human as my voice right now. And there was some studies made where they brought volunteers and they asked them, do you think it's AI generated or it's human? And the results were really shocking. Basically, it was a tad better than chance. And that already had a huge impact on society because there were surveys that shown that 3/4 of US adults now believe less than ever what they see online. And it's not really something that we didn't see coming because in 2023, the historian Yuval Harari warned that a flood of fake humans could basically collapse democracy in the same way that counterfeit money collapses economies. And in his comparison, what he means is that once there is too much fake money on the market, the economy would collapse because you wouldn't trust that your money is real money. In the same way, with information being generated by AI and flooding internet, we will soon not be able to trust anymore what we see. And so only 2 years later now, we see what Harari was talking about. And it's the kangaroo traveler, it's some deepfakes, flooding social media, and also on Spotify with music, with this band called Velvet Sundown. And this band now have more than 1 million listeners per month. But we're not really sure that they actually are humans. Apparently, the YouTuber Rick Beato concluded that they're not. It is fully an AI band. And maybe the real shock is not that AI is managing to fool us now, but rather that we trusted the feed in the first place. So let's make a 30-second trip back to 1641. At this time, René Descartes, a French philosopher, came up with a little thought experiment. And he proposed that an evil demon could be tricking him all the time. So for example, he wouldn't know that he's sitting at his table writing his text. Or you could also be tricked in thinking that you're currently watching a YouTube video. This thought experiment totally destroyed his trust in his own senses. And so he wondered, what can I actually know for sure? And he arrived to the conclusion that he could know that he exists because, as he says, I think, therefore I am. And what he meant by that is that the fact of thinking, through doubting everything around him, was enough to prove his own existence. Even in the case, if he would have been manipulated by this evil demon, he would still be existing. And now fast forward to nowadays, maybe the evil demon is not as huge as the one in the thought experiment of Descartes, but it is still very much creating a doubt on what we can believe in the limited sphere of internet and information. And you might think that it's just a detail if we don't trust what we see now on internet, because you might believe that it's just about those YouTube videos or cat memes and this kind of stuff. But actually, we depend on the information from others, on testimony, in order for us to develop our own worldview. So most of our knowledge comes from others. And nowadays, it's of course part of the discussions that we have with everybody in the real world, but we are very much impacted by what we see on internet and the content we decide to consume. And so for sure, this challenge that we have now to trust will be applied to social media, but also to media in general, the news, where do you find information, the people that you can trust online. And so we're bound to have either trust issues with whatever we see online, or we might be fully gullible and we might simply accept things that AI and bots have generated for us. So now the question is, what kind of content will AI be able to generate? Is that something that will grab our attention and be engaging or interesting? Or is that something that anyway has no added value and so that nobody will ever consider watching it? Well, it depends. On one side, there is good news if you like human content, because what AI does is simply copying the past. It uses its data that it has and it will try to generate something new out of it. But since the data is limited, there's only so much new stuff it can create. And that's what we've been seeing. When we run those prompts over and over and over again, the model starts to collapse. And so the details vanish and everything starts drifting towards some kind of cliche of what the picture, for example, should look like. But some people would say that now we have generative AI, and that means that out of this raw data that we have, we can create via AI something totally new. And so in the near future, we would be able to have interesting and engaging content for social media fully generated by those bots. But not everyone agrees on that. And I want to tell the story about a thought experiment by the philosopher John Searle. Imagine that you're in a room and you have absolutely no understanding of Chinese. Outside the room, there is a native Chinese speaker and he's writing things on a piece of paper and he's sliding the paper under the door to give it to you. You don't speak Chinese, so you cannot simply answer back. But on the table in this room, there is a rule book. And this rule book explains to you what you should do when you see a specific Chinese sign as an answer to it. And so you have a large database of these Chinese symbols and rules connected to them. And so you can start crafting your answers by simply looking at the Chinese symbols and following the instructions that you have to answer it. And once you're done, you can take the paper, you can slide it back to the native Chinese speaker, and this person's going to read it and believe that you understand Chinese. But even though your answer makes perfect sense, you don't have any understanding of Chinese. And so Searle argues that there is a difference between syntax and semantics in language. And so on one side with syntax, it's simply the formal feature of language. How do the letters look like, or the symbols, and their order in sentences and so on. On the other side, we have semantics, which is the real meaning of words. And so what Searle argues for is that those large language models, they understand the syntax because they've seen those patterns over and over again, but they don't understand the semantics, the real meaning of the sentences and the data that they possess. And so if that's the case, what they can only do is to rearrange those patterns they've already seen, rather than coming up with creative, innovative, and new concepts. And so now we could be very happy with this and say, well, we're saved if, again, you like human content. But maybe we are not, because we're assuming that humans actually appreciate this creativity and innovation. But sameness is attractive for humans. We like to see the same thing that we've seen in the past. For example, with music, and especially pop music nowadays, we can see that in the charts in this year, there are so many songs that are basically remixes from 40, 30, 20 years ago. As written in this article, most new music is not a safe investment. It's easier with current technology to reintroduce and promote old and familiar music to the masses. And it is also well known that with only 4 chords, we can create a lot of music. And there are some of these famous anthems like Let It Be or Someone You Loved that are based solely on these 4 chords. And let's not be too mean with pop music, because it also applies to storytelling. In the book The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Campbell shows that most stories share the exact storyline. And that's what he refers to as the hero journey. And to make it short, basically, we have a first situation, then a challenge that pops up, and then the transformation of the person that is being affected by this story. For example, with Titanic, we can see that Rose, she leaves her old world, she confronts love and loss, and she emerges forever changed. And our brain loves that. It gives a tiny shot of dopamine each time we see and we can predict what is coming next. Don Draper, in the show called Mad Men, called nostalgia a twinge in your heart far more powerful than memory. And South Park even turned nostalgia into talking member berries that beg viewers to relive old favorites. And so we love reruns. And that doesn't matter if they come from a human songwriter or from an algorithm. So here's the situation. We could be stuck in some kind of AI content loop showing us over and over and over again the same thing. And at the same times, huge audience may binge it anyway and love it. And here we assume that the content will be quite boring because it's always these repetitive patterns that are coming up again and again. But there are some analysts that are saying that fully AI run shows could outperform human channels by 2027. So it's a good thing that I launched before that takeover of AI, because at least you know that I am human. Or am I? So AI is coming for us, and it will have a huge impact on the internet. And I was thinking about this topic, and I wanted to share 5 potential scenarios that are coming, from very optimistic to quite sad and pessimistic. The first one is the utopian vision. We have AI-enhanced internet. In this scenario, AI is not a threat, but it's really the savior of the web. It's fixing what is not currently working and what internet should have been since the beginning. And so the content is not just generated faster, but it's smarter and it's personalized for everybody in the audience. Even better than that, it's designed for your growth. Instead of clickbait, you get curiosity. Instead of noise, you get nuance. So AI fights misinformation, it boosts critical thinking, and it also helps in the comment section to moderate the discussion so that everybody can really get the best out of the content which is available. And so internet and social media becomes this place for ideas, understanding, and community. Basically, that's kind of doing what I'm trying to do with this channel. Okay, that's the optimistic part. Maybe that might happen. Let's hope. The second scenario is what I call the dead internet theory, light version. Originally, the dead internet theory is a conspiracy theory. It's claiming that the web was overtaken by bots and propaganda, and the goal is to manipulate the population. But if you've seen my channel, you know that I'm not really fond of conspiracy theories, and I think that it's rather a failure of critical thinking to trust in them. So I've got a lighter version for us, which is less far-fetched, let's say. In this one, the AI fakes, they start to overwhelm our feeds. And the deepfakes, they blur the truth, and trust vanishes, and people stop sharing, they stop scrolling, and they even stop believing. Even Neil deGrasse Tyson warned, if everything can be faked, nothing means anything.
It could signal the end of the internet. When deepfakes become so good that all the people who used to believe the fake news won't believe the fake news anymore because they'll be sure that it was faked. There's nothing left on the internet to believe. And I think that would signal the end of the internet as a source of objective information in this world. And then the internet will just resort to cat videos.
And Gartner predicted that 90% of online content could be AI generated by 2030. So for this one, the question is, will it be adorable kangaroos with boarding passes, or propaganda engineered to divide us? And so the third scenario is the human premium. And in this one, basically, as trust collapses, the human-made label becomes the new gold. It's that we are verified as being real, as being human. And so it's the new blue check that already exists on social media, but not for status, but rather simply for being human. But here is the catch for this one. We already struggle to know if something is AI or not. So as AI improves, what makes us so sure that we will be able to develop technologies that get better at that. The fourth scenario is what I call the infinite AI loop. In this one, we're basically not bothered by any of this human versus AI discussion. Maybe we don't care what's real and what's not, so long as it's entertaining. And so we get infinite content, we get infinite dopamine, and the platforms, they feed us algorithmic comfort food. So not what challenges us, but just what keeps us watching. And honestly, who needs originality when you've got endless stimulation? And the last scenario that I want to propose is the single source absolutism. In this one, we are overwhelmed by chaos, so we retreat into simplicity. One source, one pipeline, one truth. It's kind of a exaggerated version of if you're on the right, you look at Fox News and you say, this is what Fox News said, it's true. If you're on the left, you go to CNN and you said, well, that's what's true. And I think that many of us would agree that that might feel safe and nice, but we can realize that it's basically just outsourcing our judgment. So potentially, in the best case, misinformation is down, but so is independent thought. So we're not thinking anymore, we're just basically scrolling through someone else's certainty. And as I said, the tools that should keep us safe currently are being challenged because the top tier deepfake detectors lost roughly half their accuracy on real 2024 media. And at the same time, there are those split screen sludge videos. It's those videos that are unrelated to the content being shown and are here basically just to grab your attention. The goal is simply to increase viewer retention. And as we do that, they basically train us to stop caring about whether a clip is real at all. And so where do I stand in all those possibilities? Well, I really want to stay optimistic, I have to say, but here is what I wrestle with. First of all, every time I hear that people get their news from social media, my heart skips a bit because it was never built for truth. It was simply built for engagement. And that gap is one of the reasons I believe that conspiracies have spread like wildfire in the last years. And maybe the answer isn't online at all. And maybe there's also a very positive twist out of this challenge that we have of this collapse of trust on social media, on internet. Because it could also lead to a more human-centered way of exchanging and learning from each other. So maybe it's going to be that people will go outside and the communities are going to be tighter because people will start discussing with one another. And maybe we will have real conversations with others. Potentially those conversations, they will also lead to less polarization because it's not simply that I'm writing a comment in the comment section behind a screen, but I'm in front of someone who has hugely different opinions than I do. And so this time it's harder for me to just insult the person and say that they're stupid. Maybe it will trigger a discussion and I will manage to put a face on something that I thought was simply stupidity. So maybe we go from what do you believe to why do you believe it, and we can have better discussions. But then in terms of what would still be happening online, I can see that most people are not looking for interesting, challenging ideas online. Most viewers, especially on social media, are looking for entertainment. And that explains the success of course, like the Kardashians, all the reality TV, Mr. Beast. People are looking for instant gratification. And so in this case, if AI makes it easier to binge, why wouldn't we? So maybe the real threat isn't actually AI. It's that we forget that we have a choice. Just like with climate change or factory farming or fast fashion, we often believe that the problem is just too big, that our actions don't matter. But they usually do. And if you're interested about this topic, I had a great discussion with Professor McPherson from the University of Ohio on this exact topic. So check it out. I'm going to link it in the description. And so every click, every share, every pause, that's basically a vote that we're making. That shapes what rises and what fades and what the internet will become. So we need to choose carefully. We need to support what we want to see more of and challenge what feels too easy. And sometimes maybe we should just close the tab and go outside and have a discussion with others. Because the future of the internet doesn't just depend on machines, it depends on us.